The information about Sojiro comes from the main story. Precisely, it feels like an important and meaningful part of his development. The only real bummer at the end of his story is that his rank 10 ability—
Phil!
What?
You know the point of a playthrough is to actually play the game, right?
Yeah. Stupid.
You're not actually gonna leave all that pointless crap in, are you?
Well, I haven't pressed stop yet, so yeah.
Are you shitting me?
So I'm gonna make this clear from the get-go. I'm not going to be covering most of the rest of Cvit's confidants section. Not because I agree with his points. Oh no! There's a lot wrong with them. But frankly, after going over it, there's just so many times I can say, you're missing this, or that's not how that works. And I'm gonna get a lot of mileage out of showing how much Cvit missed in his video. I do want to point out that if he didn't feel the need to try so hard to point out how terrible a game is, this is by extensively nitpicking the hell out of it, there's no way his video could have been as bad as it is, or as long as it is. That being said, there are still 3 confidants that I do want to cover, as they are more or less tied to the main story. Sai, Akechi, and Morgana.
Are you for real?
Akechi is a genius student detective and works as your rival for most of the game. His S-Link increases at certain story events, but they're all really bad and add absolutely nothing. He's an important character to the main story, but every time he ranks up, he just kinda says a couple sentences at you, ignores your responses completely, and then leaves.
Well, that's not really explaining anything at all. Now, while Royal did expand upon Akechi's character, and I can't bring that up here because that wouldn't be fair, to say there's nothing to Akechi's character is really diminishing. I mean, let's take for example his rank 3 portion of his confidant.
Huh. It seems I'm unwelcome no matter where I go. Did I bother you? My apologies. Apparently my mother was in a relationship with some lowlife of a man. She was swiftly discarded when he learned she was pregnant. That despair would lead to her death. Thanks to him, I was passed from foster home to foster home. But I do quite well by myself these days.
We have Akechi here, about to be rank 3 in the confidants, explaining that he's lonely and has feelings of being unwanted and abandoned. Yeah, that's totally nothing.
His characterization of a genius is also piss poor, and most of the time when the game tries to play him up as some smart character, it seems like everyone around him is just really stupid instead. In one TV interview immediately after an anonymous group makes a public statement against the Phantom Thieves to stop their actions, Akechi comes to the brilliant analysis: I don't know the details, but there's no doubt that they were provoked by the Phantom Thieves. Wow, truly, it takes a genius to figure out the reason that a group made a statement calling out the Phantom Thieves is because they don't like the Phantom Thieves. Just an incredible job here, done by the genius high school detective himself.
Once again, Cvit decides to neglect to give context in order to make the game look bad.
The Phantom Thieves causing an uproar in Japan. Do not speak of your false justice. We do not need the spread of such falsehood. We are the true executors of justice.
Phantom Thieves again?
However, we are magnanimous. We will give you an opportunity to repent your ways. If you agree to a change of heart, we will accept you as our own. If you reject our offer, the hammer of justice will find you.
Medjed wasn't going after the Phantom Thieves at this time. In fact, Medjed was offering adjoining to the Phantom Thieves. They weren't going after them at this time, and he was asked to give his opinion. And even then, there's no doubt, because what Cvit also neglects to mention is that
we are unseen. We will eliminate evil. Akechi-san, why do you think this announcement was made at this time?
I don't know the details, but there's no doubt that they were provoked by the Phantom Thieves. Whether it's a sense of rivalry or a simple attention grab, given the recent trends, I cannot say.
he's not talking about their motives, he's talking about how Medjed chose now to act. He is literally just asked to give his opinion, not a deduction.
No substance.
Wake up, get up, get out there. There's more to life than the way.
What a surprise. That's the distinct tang of a liar.
It's quite a nuisance.
Later, when your group happens to bump into Akechi while out eating, he reveals some of what he's figured out about the Phantom Thieves. That they have a relative amount of free time after school, and that they have a hideout to slip away to. Using the words as relative amount and talking about slipping away makes it seem like a smart statement, but when you think about it, every single high school student in the world would have free time after school if they don't have club activities or a part-time job, and every group of friends, no matter the age, most likely have a few places that they usually hang out at, like a park, or a restaurant, or a bar, or a diner, which could also be described as a hideout. To most high school students, one of their houses could easily be described as a hideout. For the Phantom Thieves, their hideout is literally the cafe where Joker lives. Akechi is describing every student ever, and is acting like this is some big revelation, leading him closer to the identities of the Phantom Thieves.
Well, it's hardly worth it, but boo!
Oh my word, you really can't fucking make this up. Not only is that not the only thing that Akechi is saying, but Cvit's own footage once again proves that he's full of it. Right now, in front of him, he has Prosecutor Nijima's sister, an ex-pupil of Madarame, and a few Shujin Academy students right in front of him. What Cvit here is doing once again is cherry-picking one line, taking it out of context in order to make what's actually being said here warp. He did that with the grammar thing, and he's doing it here as well.
My apologies. I didn't mean to butt into your conversation, but I must say, this is an interesting group. Prosecutor Nijima's sister, an ex-pupil of Madarame, and a few Shujin Academy students. It seems you're all connected to the Phantom Thieves. Perhaps you have better intel than I do.
But we're just normal high school kids. If anything, we want to hear what you gotta say, Mr. Detective.
My profiling of the Phantom Thieves has led me to believe they are a group of juveniles. They have a relative amount of free time after school and a hideout to slip away to. Furthermore, considering Kamoshida was their first target, it seems they began activity around April. In a way, all I've just said about the Phantom Thieves coincides with the group you have here.
What? You gonna report us?
But hey, I guess I'm only nitpicking because this is one of the major reasons and examples that Cvit gives in order to justify why he thinks Akechi is dumb, even though if you actually look at the full scene in question, it proves that Cvit's ignoring the other information that the group in front of him all have a connection to the Phantom Thieves case in some way or another. Shut up.
Obviously, the only group of people who could possibly have free time and a hideout are the Phantom Thieves, and definitely isn't any way to describe literally any student. To top it all off, he concludes this with, furthermore, considering Kamoshida was their first target, it seems like they began activity around April.
So you're telling me that the Phantom Thieves started when they first did something? Amazing. What excellent analysis.
Yeah, defenders of this video, keep telling me that Cvit didn't just cherry-pick information and ignore that other factors that Akechi brought up in this scene. Please tell me how much effort he put into this video that clearly demonstrates how terrible this game is. You're really making yourself seem really smart. The party asked him to explain.
But we're just normal high school kids. If anything, we want to hear what you gotta say, Mr. Detective.
He wasn't making a deduction, he was explaining the profile he came up with.
My profiling of the Phantom Thieves has led me to believe they are a group of juveniles.
This is how Akechi acts throughout the whole game, making broad and basic statements about the Phantom Thieves as everyone reacts with surprise and calls him a genius. Even the main party is in awe of his genius and deductions, and they're always wary of him even when they clearly shouldn't be.
He says, showing the scene where he points out that all members of this group have a connection to the case. Yeah, that's a broad generalization. Not like what you do, which makes no sense once the twist is revealed. Oh yeah, just put that out there with nothing to back it up.
There's a really strong disconnect between what the game wants Akechi to be and what it shows him doing. And since being a detective genius is pretty much his only character trait, it makes him come off as just a terrible character.
I mean, when you yourself do things that you accuse Akechi of doing and cherry-pick statements while removing their context, you can make anything look bad, Cvit. You're not proving a point here, you're just showing how disrespectful you are and how dumb your audience can be at times for swallowing this.
Sai is Makoto's sister and the prosecutor in charge of taking down the Phantom Thieves. You meet her at the start of the game as she interrogates you, and similarly to Igor, gets cutaways to her between arcs to rank up her confidant.
How does ranking up in the present give you bonuses in the past? That's a good question, Cvit. They don't! You see, this is something that makes me question if you even actually played the game. Cause this is something that Persona 5 does well. Because you don't get bonuses in the Judgment Arcana in the game until after you complete Sai's Palace. After all I've seen so far, it's things like this that make me wonder if you actually did play throughout the game 2 times. You don't know about holdups. You didn't know about Chinha's special ability. You didn't use the Arcana trick for social links. I'm not gonna say you didn't play the game, but really if people look close enough, it's not too far-fetched to believe that he just failed to understand the game at this level is just baffling.
Morgana is your cat and the guide through your adventure in the metaverse. He also ranks up automatically, but being a main party member, most of what you learn from him comes from the main story. The problem is, there's not much to learn about Morgana. Morgana has no character at all. Everything you learn about him is eventually contradicted by the end of the game. There is almost nothing of value to be said about him.
I don't know, being slightly egotistical and then when said ego gets bruised harshly sounds like a personality to me. Just because we don't learn all that much about his past and his confidant, that doesn't make him not a character. You learn about his goals and insecurities throughout his confidant. And while he does learn his memories at the end, that doesn't mean it's a bad...
In the first 2 dungeons, he acts obsessed about treasure and goes crazy when he sees something of value in a palace. Then this never comes up again, and when Anne mentions that to Morgana didn't go crazy when taking a treasure later in the game, he simply responds with, "Oh."
What? Treasure.
Be careful.
Treasure.
What are you talking about? It's brought up in the first 4 palaces! This also ignores the fact that before this, he had a whole lot of development. Development that was stolen by Haru, mind you, but development that was supposed to make Morgana a bit more mature. At least that was the intent.
Morgana is clearly horny for Anne when they first meet, and he keeps up the gimmick of white knighting her and calling her Lady Anne for most of the game. He seems sad at times that Anne doesn't reciprocate his love, but this is also forgotten about and nothing comes of it, even if the player decides to romance Anne.
What is with these comments?
That's not true.
I'll leave this store to you. Enjoy yourselves.
In every other Valentine's Day event, Morgana just snickers at you. So, you're straight up wrong.
You're not real. You're a clown. I have a favor to ask of you. Run away. You have to leave. You have to live. You bastard!
To be perfectly honest, I don't really care what happens to Shido one way or the other. So there goes his one trait. What the fuck are you actually supposed to think about this character?
That you took things out of context. Again.
Guess he won't be going to school for a while. Don't worry about it. This'll be a breeze compared to what we've had to face so far. And we'll have all the time to come up with the plans together. To be perfectly honest, I don't really care what happens to Shido, one way or the other. But when I consider the fact that he's your enemy, I naturally think he's my enemy as well.
You even do it in a blatant way that shows you're not willing to give the audience even a chance to find that line. But I did. This isn't Morgana saying he doesn't care. If anything, that second line implies that he, on a personal level, doesn't care about Shido. Cvit, just because you can cherry pick one line, that doesn't mean jack when there's other context. It's not hating, it's simply being critical. Oh really? I'm sorry, but considering what I've gone about, what is it now, about 4 videos at this point, showing that Cvit went out of his way to misrepresent things about the game, you'll have to forgive me if I don't buy that.
And then, when you're in Shido's palace, Morgana says, "We can't let a rotten criminal like Shido do whatever he wants any longer." What happened to not caring? It's impossible to figure out what Morgana's character is supposed to be.
Now comes the part where we throw our heads back and laugh. Ready?
Ready!
However, if they reach the deepest part of a palace and steal the owner's treasure, that person will have a change of heart and confess their crimes in reality. To access a palace, they need to know who the owner is, where the palace is, and what the owner thinks of it as. So in Kamoshida's case, he is the owner, the school is the palace, and he thinks of it as a castle, where he rules it as a king.
I know I brought this up before, but...
Why? All we're doing is starting an app.
Kamoshida. Shujin Academy. Pervert. Castle. Beginning navigation.
Here we go!
The thing about Kamoshida is that he's actually a great villain, and it's what makes the game have a great first impression. When someone thinks back to Persona 5, they remember the Kamoshida arc, not the specifics of a character's S-Link. The problem is that he's also by far the best villain in the game.
Yeah, I'd like to see where you got that from, Cvit, because honestly for me, the best villain in the game was Madarame, as well as Sai Nijima's shadow. Mainly because for me, the casino was actually the first palace that we're actually introduced to and really stands out in my mind. Meanwhile, Madarame's arc speaks to me as someone who's an artist and has had, sadly, his work stolen before. Now I know that's anecdotal, but what Cvit just did here was also anecdotal, and it isn't for the first time he's pulled this. It's really annoying that Cvit believes he can talk for almost everyone who's played this game, and even if you agree with him, that doesn't make it true. Cvit is using it as a means to attempt to make it seem like there's a majority here. And I'm somewhat in agreement that Kamoshida's arc is probably one of the strongest in the game. However, that doesn't make it so, nor does it mean that he gets to use such shoddy language in order to prove his point.
Even the enemies you encounter fit the theme of the castle and its perverted owner. Every dungeon has a small pool of enemies presented in it, but this one has by far the best theming. Pixie and Silky are creatures from fantasy settings and represent the girls Kamoshida preys on. Jack-o'-lantern is a court jester, Barrett and Elgor are medieval knights, like the teachers that protect Kamoshida and his actions, and Incubus and Succubus are devils that represent his perversion.
Yeah, that's a bit of a stretch, and you ignore other enemies such as Agathon, Andres, and Kelpie. I'm sure people are saying they represent mythological figures, but really, you can find a way to stretch anything to fit the theming of the palaces. You want an example? Well, let's look towards Madarame's palace, where you can encounter Jack Frost, a shadow that actually stands out in contrast to the rest of the shadows. Well, if we wanted to play this game, let's consider the fact that Yusuke's main element is ice. Most of the time you can encounter Jack Frost in Madarame's palace, it's either with just other Jack Frosts or other shadows that are more Japanese and detailed looking. And unlike Cvit, I can actually back this up with enemy encounter tables. Also, considering that most of the other shadows are yokai, these could potentially be representative of Madarame's students who have passed on or that he doesn't really view as students anymore. The problem that I have isn't that Cvit is reaching with its symbolism. I actually agree that it's clever, but symbolism is highly subjective and isn't really a fact of the matter. If anything, it's a theory.
Just a theory!
No, shh, he is legend. This fight against Demon Kamoshida isn't anything special, although it does showcase some of the problems with randomness in combat. He uses a move called Volleyball Assault, which can hit a party member anywhere between 1 and 5 times, meaning sometimes it's absolutely useless and does nothing to you, and other times it one-shots your character and basically forces you to restart the
Incorrect, it's 1 to 3 times. Oh no, randomness in combat. This isn't a competitive game that actually can be a problem. This is a turn-based single-player RPG. Sometimes the games need to be able to throw you for a loop so things don't get too predictable. Not to mention, there are ways to combat this. Buffs, debuffs, you know the things that you refuse to mention and deleted the best one in the game in your combat section?
A few exception to passive abilities or a castable debuff.
No, I won't get over that!
Fight. This fight also sets the tone for every other boss in the whole game. Being a gimmick fight, you can't win before the game gives you a prompt which will allow you to actually deal damage. In this case, you need to take the crown off Kamoshida's head.
What? No. Cvit, first off, that's not true at all. You don't need to knock his crown off to deal damage. You need to destroy his champion's cup. If you're going to complain about this sort of thing, at least get your facts straight.
At this point. Kamoshida will heal himself by using his trophy as a goblet, which will then be able to be targeted. Go all out, attacking his trophy until it breaks. Once shattered, Kamoshida will fly into a frenzy, and you'll be given a choice to send a party member to steal the crown. Avoid using Arn at all costs, and instead opt for Ryuji or Morgana.
Secondly, I'll actually defend these gimmick fights. If the bosses don't have their own gimmicks or flair to them, what makes them different from the other enemies other than aesthetic values? Other than just how they look, bosses should be able to stand out from regular enemies, and this is boss design 101. Since if all you're doing is beating up what is essentially a fatter regular enemy, then what's the point? Also, these add some mechanics to the fight which can make the fights more memorable. And thirdly, no, you don't need to do the gimmick to beat the boss. The game offers you the chance to do it, and really, there's only one boss that makes it a requirement to do so. And that's the second to last one.
It's so boring! This is also where you're introduced to Memento's requests, by changing the heart of a guy who was stalking a former girlfriend. Upon changing his heart, he reveals that he used to be a student for a famous painter in Madarame, but that Madarame just used his pupils to make art for him so he could take all the credit, money, and fame.
I know this is a nitpick, but that is not what Shadow Nakanohara said. He said he was just thrown out by his teacher, and before that he said Madarame stole everything from him.
What about Madarame? He stole
everything for me, but you're letting him off the hook?
Madarame? What the hell's this guy going on about?
But that doesn't really translate into what Cvit just said. If anything, for all the Phantom Thieves know at this point, Nakanohara could have just been thrown out of an art school and then his life spiraled out of control. The only reason why Cvit is saying this, if I had to hazard a guess, is because he knows what's going on here and is using his meta-concept skills to look back on this scene.
Then he asks you to look into him, and then our party immediately forgets all about him and doesn't actually follow up on this at all. Instead, a convoluted series of events happens which results in the party meeting Yusuke, who's Madarame's only pupil along the way. Yusuke finds Anne by randomly seeing her exit a subway station in the middle of the city while in a car with Madarame, chases her across multiple subway lines somehow, and then talks to her about how he was immediately taken in by her beauty and needs her to be his model so he can paint her. He asks you to come to the exhibition.
Are you for real?
You already have the keywords of Madarame and Shack, so you guess that he probably thinks of it as a museum and get a hit. Morgana also mentions that one of the keywords is plagiarism, but this doesn't make sense with the established rules that you need the 3 keywords of being the person, the place, and how they view it. And of course, no one comments on this at all.
Why? All we're doing is starting an app.
Kamoshida. Shujin Academy. Pervert. Castle. Beginning navigation.
Here we go!
I fail to see the logic here!
But the game kind of just ignores that in favor of having Yusuke approach Anne and having that be the way they get interested in Madarame instead. Coincidences can happen, but how lucky is it that only days after being told about Madarame from the former pupil, you so happen to be approached by Madarame's only current student, who is literally the only person in the world who could have access to Madarame's house. And that he just so happened to see Anne for the first time today while in his car and was so taken by her beauty that he decides to chase her on foot and asks her to be his model. This entire scenario is contrived as shit. It's hard to understand why it's even in the game when they already had an in to targeting Madarame.
And that's blatantly wrong. He even shows footage of Yusuke seeing An from afar when they're discussing after they got out of mementos.
This is where you're introduced to Yusuke, the next person to join the party. But the way that
I want all of you to look at it!
In paying attention to the morning events at the station, you learn from An that she feels like she's being followed. It makes the implication that Yusuke has been watching An from afar for a little while now. Do you see why this can be considered frustrating? For something that's claimed to be so in-depth to cover everything, the fact that Cvit outright neglects important information that goes against the notions he's peddling, his video title feels like it more applies to him than his own game. Persona 5 is not perfect. Then there's the fact that Cvit ignores that the Phantom Thieves had exams during this time period, and so I unfortunately don't agree with this. Especially when his own footage shows that on 5-7 Yusuke saw An, not Anne, and the game has been hinting that he's been stalking her.
Anyway, so Yusuke could have easily been introduced there by having seen Anne and approaching her to talk about his teacher's art.
How dare you say that to me? Of all people!
You mean the gallery that An could only go to because Yusuke gave her tickets for?
Madarame-sensei's exhibition will begin at the department store near the station tomorrow. I'll be there to help out on opening day. Please come by. It'd be great if you could give me your answer in regard to being a model then. I bet you have no interest in the fine arts, but I'll give you tickets too.
Also, An didn't really have any interest to go to the alley initially. If she didn't get free tickets, An probably wouldn't even want to go.
When I was watching that special on TV, his artwork was pretty nice. Plus, we've got free tickets.
In addition to Cvit being wrong about the events, this actually sets up quite a bit of character in a way that Cvit doesn't actually explain. And I'm doing this because some people think I have no idea what it's like to write, even though I've got a degree in storyboarding and writing. You see, how you introduce a character can be a powerful way to make their presence more impactful in the story. Let's take Yusuke's first meeting as for the prime example. Duh. And how it's used to explain what we know about Yusuke. Well, we know that he's over the top when asked An to model for him while they're both in public, showing that he's quite eccentric and doesn't really follow traditional norms in society when he's doing something that's taking his attention. We also know he's willing to be creepy in regards to his confirmation to stalking at the An, and that he'll lie about things in order to protect himself, which is funnily enough comes into play later with the Madarame part where he's willing to lie for his sensei. And we also know that he's passionate about the arts because, well, he's willing to almost break the law to do it. You see, this actually established quite a bit about Yusuke's character, and even if this happened in a way that Cvit explained, which it wasn't, I'd still defend this scene because sometimes you have to forego logical through line for a story in the sake of the characters because guess what? Sometimes characters, and shock of all shocks, can be illogical. They are human. So yeah, considering how this scene goes, it does a great job of establishing Yusuke's character and sows the seeds that while he might be overly passionate about art, that there's a bit of darkness undergrowing that eccentricity. But hey, I guess since I didn't ignore the game actually told me, what do I know?
But even though that one of the keywords was apparently plagiarism, no one on your team can put 2 and 2 together, and they all just wonder about what these paintings could possibly mean. Ryuji even says, "Dude, I don't get it." After looking around more, you leave the palace.
I see. My ass. What?
First off, they are piecing it together. Because while 2 is 2 equals fish, you still need to show your work. And surprise surprise, you decide to skip the scene where they announce that.
This is a fine reason to target him, but the main characters are disconnected from him a lot more than Kamoshida, and frankly, it doesn't make much sense of how hyped they are to take him down. Madarame is a considerably weaker villain than Kamoshida too. They barely cared about Madarame's past abused students, and they are too stupid to figure out that he's plagiarizing his students' work despite being literally spelled out to by Morgana, and even though Yusuke does become a main character later, the Phantom Thieves still have no attachment for him yet. The only reason they attack him is out of a nebulous sense of justice. But it's harder to care about him as much as the previous villain since he basically has no impact on the main character lives.
So just because these thieves don't have a personal connection to the villain, that doesn't make him a bad villain. In addition, Cvit, either way, this is an opinion piece, or don't. I'm getting sick of you doing this. Honestly, if I were given a choice between Madarame and Kamoshida as evil guys, I'd actually prefer Madarame. Not only because I'm an artist myself who went through a similar stink that Madarame's pupils went through, but also due to the fact that Madarame isn't as over the top as Kamoshida and actually puts out a front. Sure, you can argue that it's less personable for the main cast, but that's the point. They're phantom thieves who are out to save people, even people they don't really know. And they get fired up after seeing how Madarame treats his students, which reminds them of how Kamoshida treated them. And even then, they can relate to it as being a means to the end, which by the way, Cvit conveniently neglects this scene.
Madarame's no different from Kamoshida. That asshole's using Yusuke who doesn't have parents. You're telling me we should just ignore how he's being treated horribly like the other pupils?
No. It is frustrating to leave this alone, even if Kitagawa-kun is fine with it himself.
You can't leave it be because you've endured a lot yourself with Kamoshida.
Yeah.
Anyways, we gotta go after this guy. Madarame is the kind of target we've been waiting for. Let's help Yusuke come to his senses too, before he ends up like us.
They see that Yusuke could potentially end up like them due to what Kamoshida did. And while I said Cvit neglects this, he's more preoccupied with something else.
And we're introduced to one of the worst mechanics in the game, the forced stop halfway through the dungeon. I hesitate to even call it a mechanic since it's only used 2 more times in the entire game, but this does nothing but slow down the gameplay and waste the player's time, forcing you to have to go out of the dungeon and use another day to go back and finish it instead of allowing you to complete it all in one single go, so players can get back to the life sim aspect of Persona 5.
Oh no, I have to waste a day that's been dedicated already to story progression. Seriously, you want to talk about wasting time? Let's talk about Persona 4.
Hold it right there!
Where you had to gather information from NPCs in order to even get to the main dungeons, which sometimes you're unable to find because these NPCs only show up on certain days. You know, the only reason why I'm bringing this up is because Cvit says that previous Persona games did this better, yet the last one has a much more time-wasting mechanic to even access the dungeons in the Midnight Channel. Even then, this really shows how much of Cvit doesn't understand story structure. We need this as a reason to get Yusuke into the metaverse as he's a party member and a key figure of this story arc. How else is he supposed to get in on this? If you plow through the entire palace in one day and got the treasure, i.e. the Sayuri, and gave it to Yusuke, that'd be pretty anticlimactic. Not to mention, we wouldn't get the scene of Yusuke finding out the truth of his sense.
A breathtaking sight. Imitations they may be, but together they make a fine spectacle. The children who adored you as father. The prospects of your pupils. How many did you trample upon? How many dreams did you exchange for riches? No matter what it takes, I will bring you to justice!
Nor would we actually get development if you could power through the palace. Heck, you probably won't even have access to Yusuke as a confidant.
In this case, it seems obvious as a way to use to set up the funny comedic scene involving Anne and Yusuke. You'll remember from before, Yusuke only agreed to your team leaving is if Anne became his nude model. So obviously, immediately after leaving his palace, Ryuji says the only way to get in is having Anne go nude, and Morgana emphatically agrees, despite Anne's repeated complaints and very clear discomfort. She eventually agrees for the sake of the mission, and all the guys get excited about this. Later in a text conversation when Anne asks again if she really has to go through with all this, you even have the option to send a text saying, "Strip for him, Anne." This whole scenario and situation are extremely tone deaf considering the entirety of the previous arc was Anne being sexually harassed by someone in the position of power.
You know, this kind of sounds familiar.
The story surrounding this dungeon revolves around sexual harassment, physical and sexual abuse, and sexual coercion from a position of power, and it treats all of those evils with the gravity they deserve. But then, in the very next dungeon, the game just completely faceplants by having this whole bit where one of your characters is being pressured into doing nude art modeling. And the whole situation is presented as, isn't this funny? Because she's gonna have to get naked even though she doesn't want to. This is the same character that was just the victim of threatening sexual advances from her teacher. It is cringeworthy. There's even this moment where her two male friends tell her that she should just go through with it. They even pressure her into doing so for the sake of the team, rather than finding some other alternate solution to the problem. Heck, your main character's even given a dialogue choice where all of the options basically boil down to making her feel bad if she doesn't strip.
What was that about one criticizing this game again? Ah, right.
I never see any of the real issues that permeate down to the game's core being discussed in any worthwhile fashion. It's been over 2 years and no one has done it yet, so I guess it's up to me to get it out there.
Said it. The price to pay for power?
Kinda makes you sound even more egotistical when you shoot yourself in the foot when you have other criticism that you've taken from other people and supplanting them in your own video.
And was being blackmailed into having sex with the main villain, and when she declined, he then turned to her best friend, which then pushed her to attempt suicide in front of Anne. In the Kamoshida arc, Anne's growth and realization of her true self came specifically from when she decided to stand up for herself and not give in to Kamoshida's perverted demands. And she was disgusted at his cognition of her being a dumb bimbo in a bikini who flaunts herself all over him and agrees with everything he has to say. This wouldn't have really been an issue if it had been addressed at all, but the game completely ignores Anne's past, and when the time comes to meet Yusuke, the scene is portrayed as a funny with the wacky anime hijinks music even playing in the background throughout all of it. The joke of guys being perverted wanting to peep on their friends while they change is a classic trope in anime, and it seems like they wanted to include this anime trope in their anime game, but no one thought about how this event looks in context of everything that has happened to this character up until this point. The game up until now is trying to be a dark story about corruption in the unsavory parts of society, like a teacher abusing their power, manipulating their students, and sexually harassing them. But it also wants to be a funny anime dating sim, which each on their own works perfectly fine, but together mix like oil and water, working completely against themselves. And the end result is a scene you can't help but feel is gross when remembering what just point.
I activate my trap card!
Okay, stop. Oh my word, there is just so much to unpack here. First off, this isn't the perverted anime trope. Why? Because Yusuke isn't interested in Anne as a sexual object.
So, don't try anything perverted, okay?
Stop making such odd assumptions. I have absolutely no interest in her as someone of the opposite sex.
Huh?
And throw in the fact that neither Joker nor Ryuji are going to be allowed in it during
What?
Nude?
To think I'd be able to create a nude painting with my most ideal model. Of course, you two won't be allowed in, and I ask that you forget about our discussion today as well.
Kinda shoots that it's the perverted anime trope. There is no peeping. Why are you even bringing this up? Secondly, they didn't ignore her past.
Madarame's no different from Kamoshida. That asshole's using Yusuke who doesn't have parents. You're telling me we should just ignore how he's being treated horribly like the other pupils?
No. It is frustrating to leave this alone, even if Kitagawa-kun is fine with it himself.
You can't leave it be because you've endured a lot yourself with Kamoshida.
Yeah.
Anyways, we gotta go after this guy. Madarame is the kind of target we've been waiting for. Let's help Yusuke come to his senses too, before he ends up like us.
Right.
Gee, it's almost like she doesn't want Yusuke to end up in a similar situation, and while she's obviously uncomfortable with it, she's willing to do this in order to help him, especially when afterwards you learn that one of Madarame's students committed suicide because of how he treated his students.
One of Madarame's former pupils. He gave me lodging at his home, where I thought only about art. I genuinely wanted to be an artist. There was another pupil as well. A very talented man, multiple years my senior. Obviously, Madarame kept tabs on him. Everything he made was claimed as a Madarame original. He wasn't the only victim, though. In response to Madarame's actions, that senior pupil committed suicide.
Suicide?
He must have been unable to bear seeing his work praised under Madarame's name. That was when I disobeyed Madarame's orders and left. But he quickly pressured other parts of the art world, and my life as a painter was destroyed. Not only for me, it's to save the life of another man as well. Even now, there's still one young man remaining under Madarame's tutelage. I think he's about your age.
That has to be Yusuke.
Not only is he a talented artist, he also owes Madarame for taking him in after his mother passed. He is the perfect target.
So Yusuke's got no choice but to listen.
I actually spoke to him a few times back when I was still living at Madarame's. I asked him if he found it painful to stay with Madarame. And you know what he said? If I could leave, I would.
Kitagawa-kun.
Hell yeah! Madarame's just a piece of shit who preys on the weak.
Suicide. I'll never let something like that happen. Plus, we finally got to hear how Kitagawa-kun really feels.
Yeah, I guess these scenes just don't matter, huh?
Is gross when remembering what just previously happened to this character, and is tonally out of place with everything the game has been up until this point.
Totally out of place? Have you even been playing the game?
You hearing this too? This is no time to be joking around!
You guys are having a rough...
But how are we supposed to do that?
Just take her back to where we came in. That's how it worked last time, right?
Oh yeah! Can you lend me a hand? We can't deal with Kamoshida if we don't.
What are you...
We'll explain after everything's over.
Hey! And just where are you touching?
Whoa, sorry, I didn't mean... That's not important.
You guys serious?
Also, this goes to show once again that Cvit doesn't understand writing, because guess what? If the game was all serious or just humorous, it'd get really boring really fast. Because you need highs and lows in writing when it comes to tension. If you want your viewers to feel it when you crank up the tension, then you need to give them moments of lower tension. It means that your story goes battle scene, gunfight, bandit attack. You can increase the impact of the final bandit attack by replacing the gunfight with something like a campfire scene, worrying about medicine for a wounded character. Tension is one of the things you, as the author, want to fine-tune from scene to scene, from moment to moment. Humor of the right type is one that your tools that you can use. You probably know lots of ways to build tension. Laughter, whether joyous, nervous, or otherwise, is a release of tension. I'm sorry, but having scenes like this in concept can be a good thing, especially for a game as long as Persona 5.
In the end of this dungeon, you're confronted by one of the worst bosses in the whole game, painting for Madarame. His whole deal is that he's split into 4 separate pictures, but half heals from magic damage and half heals from physical damage. So you can't use any AoE attacks, and as if that wasn't enough, you have to kill all 4 parts of him 3 different times, and the last 2 times require you to kill them within a few turns of each other, or else they come back at full health. So you need to spread your damage thin to get every part low enough to knock them all out at the end of a turn. It's just a long, boring fight that requires a lot of luck to dodge his attacks and not get hit by weak elements since you need to endure for so long.
Oh no, a boss that's actually proving that my terrible team composition is bad is probably the worst boss in the entire game, and I can't just power my way through, and I need to be able to think about how to fight this boss. The horror! The game gives you a challenge, and you call it the worst boss of the entire game.
Is this some kind of twisted joke?
Also, you're wrong about his immunities. It's not half and half, only the mouth absorbs physical attacks. So I don't know what you're going on about here, since your physical party could actually defeat the 2 eyes and nose with physical attacks, and take out the mouth with magical abilities. Oh gee, if only you had someone with high magical stats who could potentially have the access to the 2nd level magic spell that could help you burn through this. Ha ha! Painting! But where are we gonna find someone like that?
What's with this? How can you expect me to be calm?
After the fight, you leave and take back his treasure, which is the unedited Sayori made by Yusuke's mom. It's only now that you share contact information with Yusuke and he joins the Phantom Thieves group chat. So every time you've been meeting up until now, they've had no way to contact Yusuke. So I like to imagine that every day Yusuke just sits at the train station until dark and realizes that nobody's showing up today to go into the pallet.
By the way,
Kitagawa-kun gave me his contact info. And the address to his sensei's atelier.
I am not surprised at all.
What a surprise. That's the distinct tang of a liar.
are you for real?